Developed countries do have more responsibility because, one, the underdeveloped countries' natives more than likely are unaware of the threat that climate change poses because they are so distracted with the problems going on in their own country. Developed countries have the necessary resources and organization to combat climate change, and developed countries are more responsible for global warming in the first place because of carbon dioxide discharges from over the years. Malarial mosquitoes thrive in stagnant water, but for most, the permanent struggle for these people in developing countries is to provide for their families in an increasingly erratic environment. A quote made by a government official in Niger was, "The poorest are always the hardest hit because they're already on the edge."
All of the world is in the fight to stop climate change, and individuals have been given advice to strive to become environmentally friendly. But when the efforts turn to world nations as a whole, the question of who has the greatest responsibility to stop climate change remains unconfirmed. Each nation impacts climate change with the pollutants and emissions that they release into the atmosphere. Those countries are responsible for taking back the harm that they have done to the entire world. It is not a matter of a nation being more developed than another. It is a matter of rebuilding the damage that each nation is responsible for causing.
But wouldn't building an eco-friendly factory be more expensive? These nations are struggling to feed themselves. They're not going to want to spend any more money than is absolutely necessary.
Well, it would be more expensive from the start, but in the long run, it would be more beneficial to those nations, and they would end up saving more money.
Well, these people aren't interested in saving money in the long run. They're interested in having food to eat tomorrow.
Well, are they interested in breathing next year? Because it's a pressing issue that needs to be solved as soon as possible.
My first argument was that developed countries produce much more emission than less developed countries. According to Carnegie's Institution Department of Global Ecology, carbon dioxide is rising at an alarming rate. During the 1990s, carbon dioxide emission increased approximately 1.3% each year. But since 2000, the rate has increased to 3.3% each year, with an estimated annual global CO2 emission increase of 35% from 1990 to 2006. Carbon dioxide is not considered a pollutant unless there is an excess of it, which is what we have globally. Reasons for such high levels of carbon dioxide are mainly from deforestation and vehicle emissions, contributed mainly by developed countries. In Cairo, Egypt, the pollution is horrid. According to the World Health Organization, the typical Cairo resident does the same damage as smoking 20 cigarettes a day just breathing in the city. That is 18 million people.
Climate change is a pressing issue that we all must deal with. I believe that this is a simple and true statement that we can all get behind. Every generation has had their great conflict, and they have had to overcome or succumb to their individual challenges. Our generation finds themselves faced with a challenge that we can neither afford nor survive giving up to: climate change. We, as a world, must work together to defeat this formidable opponent, while it is still our problem. It must not be allowed to pass on to our children's or our children's children's generation. Developing nations have a greater responsibility to fight climate change for the very reason that they are developing. They are at a point in their history that growth is exponential, and with every building that is built lies another chance to gain ground on climate change. It is now that a developing country must go in a direction different from the one that today's developed nations took during their development. In their rapid expansion, they must keep in mind climate change, its causes, and its effects, while developing is the best time to fight climate change.
In your constructive, you said that we should divide up the duties among all nations, but how are we going to divide it up if less developed nations can barely feed their people? They don't have enough money to make these eco-friendly advancements.
Well, also, as I said in my constructive, it is the responsibility of developed nations to aid developing nations in the necessary constructions that we need to make towards growing green.
In your debate, you said that you asked if some areas of China were still developing. Are there not areas of the United States that are still developing, which makes you unable to judge a nation?
What parts of the U.S. are still developing?
Just for the sake of argument, you can look at various parts of the United States, wilderness areas, parts where it's not people. Basically what you were saying is just because there's a part of China that is undeveloped, you can't count it as a developed nation. So that's true for every nation. Again, China, I hate to keep harping on the same example, but it's crucial to, I think, both of our arguments. China pollutes more than the United States does in like 10 years, every year. So it's bigger, maybe it has less percentage developed, but it definitely